Hey guys, Fish Tank Mike here. Today we're going to be talking all about aquarium lids. Sometimes you need to have one, other times you don't. But if there's one thing that we can all agree on is that we don't want fish to jump out of our tank. So how can you have a fish tank without a lid and fish not jump out of it? We're going to talk all about it. Just taking a quick look at some of the tanks in my fish room, you'll notice that we don't have lids on pretty much any of our tanks. Nothing on the nanos up here. And we definitely don't have anything on the top of our giant water box tank. You can probably see why. Do I have fish occasionally jump out of my tanks? Yes, I absolutely do. And that's in part because I don't have any lids. But the reason why I don't have any lids is because on some of my tanks, I just can't have one because of things coming up out of them. But then also, the rimless tanks don't lend themselves to being easy to find lids for. There's all kinds of different ways that you can make a custom lid for your fish tank. You don't have to use glass, but that's an obvious one. Just go back to the search bar and type in DIY aquarium lid and you're gonna see a million different videos with a ton of different ways that you can make stuff. Some of the different kinds of lids that you can make are super nice. It just takes a lot of work and you have to really get customized with it, you know, making special cutouts for your filter input and output, other little things that you might have on the tank like our CO2 diffuser, and then of course however you're lighting the tank. If you have a hanging light, then you don't have much to worry about. And maybe I just really haven't found the perfect way for me to go about doing that, but what I've learned over the years is that there's certain things that you can do to your tank that doesn't have a lid that gets you kind of the same protections that a lid does. The first thing that you can do is just drop your water level down. So on our two beta tanks that we have up here on this shelf, we have probably, I don't know, 2-3 inches of a gap at the top, and that seems to be more than enough to prevent our beta fish from jumping. But unfortunately, not every aquarium is going to work with that strategy. So for me, it really depends on the aquascape. You guys know that I get pretty elaborate with the scapes, and a lot of times it just doesn't look good or work with what I'm trying to do to have the water level be that low. I think two of the best examples of that are these two tanks right here. So obviously the sand waterfall tank has to be at a certain height water level wise, or else the waterfalls aren't going to work and it's going to look weird. And then also with the treescape, I can't have my water level sitting down like 3 inches below, because then I'll have trees up out of the water and it won't achieve what I want it to look like. But like MD's tank here, the scape is kind of whatever, like it doesn't really look good right now. I apologize for that, but even if it did look really nice in this same style, having the wood poke up out of there, it looks kind of cool. It works with this tank. And same goes for Red's tank. So obviously we have the bamboo thing going on over here, and having the water up at the top works too. But again, these fish are prone to jumping, and this really enhances the look of the bamboo style. So it's an easy thing to do. Don't worry if having the water level down a little bit lower is not what you want to do. There's another option, and it's what I like to call the organic lid. And what that means is basically you just have a bunch of floating plants. I have a combination of that going on here in the guppy wine glass, even though, you know, guppies, in my experience, don't really ever jump, and there's no way they're getting out of that. The plants in here are just strictly for water quality purposes, but I think you get the point. Something that I just realized I should mention is that if you go with the less water in the tank thing, you gotta make sure that you keep your glass clean, because things do get a little messy. I just noticed that. But what we have over here in MD's tank is a combination of both. So I pulled out a lot of the floating plants yesterday, and you can see that even though we have the water level low enough to where he's not going to make that high jump, back when we first set it up, it was more like this. So something where he could, if he was really athletic, although I'm not sure that he 100% is up to that level, you know, having the floating plants in here is just added benefit of water quality and makes me feel like he's not going to jump. Sure, a fish could totally still jump out of a tank that has floating plants in it. It's not like it's really creating much of a barrier, but it seems to be just that visual disturbance, that looking up and seeing something physical seems to be enough to prevent them from even trying to jump out of the tank. There is kind of a fine line with this though. Obviously you don't want your tank to look like this. This is a ton of duckweed, and you can see it's kind of thinned out a little bit. I did just pull a ton of it out of here the other day, but before there wasn't any light getting underneath this thing. So that is something, if you're trying to grow high-tech plants, you want to get good light penetration into your tank, and this does disrupt that. Not to mention, not everybody likes having duckweed. Luckily, there's more floating plants out there than just duckweed. You can use Sylvinia. There's a bunch of different types of that. Red root floaters, things like that, that won't propagate everywhere and become a giant mess that you'll never be able to get rid of. So just keep that in mind. There's more options. You don't have to use duckweed. And by no means, guys, do you have to go without a lid and then do these things. You know, if you have a traditional rim tank, the lids are everywhere. I think they're also Aquarium brand like the tanks, and they fit good, and there's room in the back for most of your equipment, and that can be just what you should do. I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't have a lid on your tank if it's that easy. I think this is mostly for people that have rimless tanks and aren't familiar with some of the things that are commercially available lid-wise. I'm not sure if that many other companies make lids and setups for lids for rimless tanks, but I know UNS does have a kit where it's like these little plastic tabs that sit on the edges of the rimless tank, and then they have pieces of glass, or maybe they're acrylic, that sit on top of those tabs, and so that is like a legit lid. But I don't know if they make them for really big tanks or even kind of average normal sized ones. I think they're primarily for small nanos. I could totally be wrong about that. They might make them for everything, so I would just head over to Boost Plant and see what they have. This might be the last tip that I have for you as far as how to prevent fish from jumping out, guys, and it's 100% anecdotal. It's just what I've observed in my hobby. And it's basically just that the shallower your tank is, I think fish are prone to jump more out of those tanks. The big water box over there, it's like 170 gallons-ish, and I've only had a few rummy-nosed tetras jump out of that tank in the entire 6 months that they've been in there. I can count on one hand how many have jumped, and that's kind of like an acceptable limit to me. I think a lot of that, I think actually most of it, is just because of the sheer height of the tank. It's about 2 feet tall, and that seems to be enough of a dimension, enough water volume plus the up-down dimension to prevent them from wanting to jump out. I've had rummy nose a bunch of different times in my fish tank keeping career, and one thing I do know is that when I had a bunch of rummy nose in a 33-gallon long, so a very not tall tank, I think it's probably half of this size, about a foot, maybe even less, I had jumpers like crazy in that aquarium. So I think it definitely matters the relative size of the fish to the water volume they're in, and then also what that up-down dimension is. So I'm pretty confident in that the taller your tank is, the less chance that your fish are going to want to jump out. But again, it's 100% anecdotal, and it's just my experience, so I might be making it up. Haven't had even any angels try and jump out of this tank. I mean, when they start eating food and they get aggressive, they will come up and attack the top, but I haven't had anybody jump out. I usually keep this tank really, really full. Need to do a water change and make sure we get that up there. But even with this tank basically overflowing, still haven't really had any issues, even with the angelfish, so keep that in mind. A question you might have is, why are your fish jumping out of the tank in the first place? Are they mad? Are they scared? Are they trying out for the Olympics? I mean, what's going on? I gotta sit down for this. There's a few different reasons, but I think ultimately it just comes down to instinct. So when you're in the tank, you're doing maintenance, you got your arm in there. Some fish, depending on the aquarium, the size of the aquarium, I think, they're going to be, get spooked, so they're jumping because they're scared, they're trying to get out of the way, they're, pressured into a tight space, and the only way to go is up, so they go up. And the same can be said, I guess, if there's turmoil in the tank, they're getting beat up by somebody, then they might jump. When that happens, when you feed, at least when I feed sometimes, like my curries get a little crazy, and some of them jump pretty high, and sometimes they almost jump out of the tank. But again, that's when I'm right there, so if that did happen, I could just grab them and put them back in. So really, it's just instinct no matter what, the pressure being different. So either out of fear or out of overexcitement for the food, but then too, it could just be that they are natural jumpers and they do it for fun. So you think of at least when I think of rainbow fish love to jump. It's just something that they do. Other fish like hatchet fish, pencil fish that hang out primarily at the top of the water seem to also be prone to jumping, and I think that's just their instinct. I'm really not sure if plecos jump out of tanks. I'm sure that they could. I don't know because I've never had them because I have a phobia of them. I just went through and inspected around all of my tanks, and I didn't find any fish that have jumped out recently, but here is a snail that has unfortunately managed to crawl out. This little nearite snail met his demise, I don't know when, probably a long time ago, because he's completely petrified. But a question that I wanted to address is like, okay, you find a fish on your floor, maybe you're super new, okay? Maybe you're super new, and you come out to your aquarium, you see your fish on the ground, can you save it? What do you do? And my general rule of thumb is that if it's crispy, then you're out of luck. If you witness the fish jump out, or you hear some splashing and look over and then there's a fish on the ground, or you come out and the fish is still wet or looks like it might have happened within the last few hours, then you can totally, probably maybe save the fish. So grab them, you can either put them in the tank if you want to, or you can take some tank water out in like a Tupperware tub, put the fish in that water and just leave them be for an amount of time, several hours sometimes. A fish can come back even if it looks like it's dead and it's on the ground. So keep that in mind. Unless the fish is looking really bad, he's dry, or especially if he's crispy, then there's no way. But if the fish looks like there's even a little bit of moisture still on him, go ahead and try it. A lot of times they can come back. At the end of the day, any fish can jump out of any tank, okay? It's never 100%. Yes, there are fish that are less prone to jumping than others. There are fish that are super prone to jumping out, and you definitely want to have a lid on them, but nothing's ever 100%. I actually just finished an article on my website. I'll put a link for it at the top of the description, so you can check it out if you want to read more about how to stop fish from jumping out of your tank. It's going to cover basically the three main things that we talked about today, as well as give some examples of some fish that I know to be not prone to jumping out of tanks and things of that nature. So check that out if you're interested, guys. I think that's probably going to do it for today's video. While you're over on the website, don't forget to check out the stickers, magnets, cling store. We got a bunch of new designs over there. Thank you in advance. Support has been great lately, and I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching the video as well, and we'll see you in the next one.